Good morning. We are in the book of Exodus. And we're going to start in verse 16. And we'll see if we knock out the chapter or maybe we'll get stopped on something. Moral and ceremonial principles is how my Bible titles this section. If a man entices a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall surely pay the bride price for her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money according to the bride price of virgins. So, in short, it's verses like these that people get confused about. I find quite often, it's unbelievers who really want to tear into some of this stuff because they're looking for like the worst case scenario. How bad could these verses be? As opposed to trying to understand, no, there's actually good in all this. And if you understand that the giver is good, then you should probably recognize what he's giving is good. And so the idea is simply here is that a man entices a virgin, a young unwed girl. And if he sleeps with her, well, the idea is like, well, you know what? You should really marry the girl and not make her an undesirable bride. Believe it or not, once upon a time, virginity was a virtue. Yeah. It was something that people looked for when they were trying to find a bride. And if we have now a woman who's not a virgin, well, it's going to make it harder for her to get married. What's the bride price? You have to understand that it was actually a hefty sum. There are stories, of poor people who couldn't afford to get married because they just couldn't afford to pay the bride price. Well, what was that? Well, what that was the husband paid a hefty sum to the father of the bride. And in a sense, it's almost like an insurance plan, because if anything ever happened to the bride, the father had this lump sum of money of which he could care for the girl with. And so here, in a sense, it's like, well, hey, man, whether you marry her or not, you're going to pay the bride price now. You took something from her of great value, and so you're going to pay the price for it. Verse 18, you shall not permit a sorceress to live, and whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. Those aren't really connected. Maybe they are connected. Honestly, as you go through this, right there, any sorcery, any witchcraft, it was just a death penalty. They were trying to keep the camp pure. And so there were strict punishments for these things. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. And again, they're just saying, we're going to draw the line and have morality in Israel. And so people understood these are lines not to be crossed. Verse 20, he who sacrifices to any god except the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. Again, worshiping to another god, it's a death penalty. You shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. Here we have something that ties into a few different places. For one, mistreating the stranger shows you again, like when we were back in chapter 21, looking at the rules for a Hebrew servant, well, there were rules to protect foreigners as well. It wasn't just like, well, we're okay and everyone else we can treat poorly. God says, no, you're going to take exceptionally good care of your brothers, but you're supposed to be good to everyone. This is what we see in Galatians chapter 6, is where it tells us to not grow weary while doing good, for we shall reap if we do not lose hope. And so it tells us to do good. Then it says, especially to those who are the household of faith. You know, if you look at the New Testament, Christians are called to be loving to everyone, but especially to other believers. You know, if you go through the New Testament and you look at the widows that were being cared for, those widows were Christian widows. It wasn't just every widow in Jerusalem. They were Christian widows. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, it actually gives a very clear cut to make it onto the roll. They actually accounted like you're in, you're not in. There's a group of widows that they would care for, and they'd totally provide for them. But they were believers. They were serving members of the church. And so it's just a good reminder that we're called to love everyone and to care for everyone and to remember that we were once unbelievers too. That's exactly what it was saying here. Hey, take care of the stranger, and don't forget that you were once a stranger. You were once strangers in Egypt. And so we are believers, and we should love unbelievers. And remember that we were once unbelievers too. We once were wicked and just loved our sin and could care less about sinning. But if you go back again, like chapter 21, the extra loving rules concerning a Hebrew servant. That parallels once again. You know, they shall know that we are disciples by our love for everyone. No, it's by our love for one another. Again, there's supposed to be love for all, and yet an especially fond, deep, caring, and giving love within the church. And that is supposed to be a sign to those outside of the church to look in and see the way we care for one another. And so, I'm just going quickly. Yeah, we're just going to knock out the rest of the chapters. I mean, that's probably one of the big applications of this chapter, is just this idea of caring for all, but especially caring for those of the household of faith. We're called to love everyone, but we're called to love our brothers and sisters in Christ above and beyond the love for others. We're supposed to be serving our brothers and sisters and giving to our brothers and sisters, all the more so compared to just all those around. All right, Exodus 22, verse 21, you shall neither mistreat a stranger. Oh, we just did that. 22, you shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall be widows and your children fatherless. God cares for the needy. Plain and simple. God knows the people who have it harder off. And God is an equitable God. He sees those who needs more and would give more to them. He sees those who need less and he'll give less because he knows that the extra needy need the extra help. Verse 25, if you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you, you shall not be like the moneylender to him. You shall not charge him interest. In short, now the Jews later on especially were known as bankers and people who did business, but again, to each other. I've got to run a business. But if you're working with a brother or a sister from the church, try not to rake them over the coals. I get it. You charge a premium rate, because you provide a quality service. When you're dealing with your brothers and sisters in Christ, give them a fair rate. You got to feed your kids. You got to pay the bills too, but think about it. Verse 26, if you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for that is his only covering. It is his garment for his skin. What will he sleep in? And it will be that when he cries to me, I will hear, for I am gracious. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 40, in the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about if someone asks your cloak, give your garment also. Different words, different translations. But in short, if someone asks for your light jacket, give them this heavy one also. This is like when Jesus talks about turning the other cheek and going the extra mile. This outer garment was the heavy coat that they wore, that they would wrap up in to sleep in out in the cold, like no tent, no house. They just had this very heavy outer garment that they'd wear. And this is the one that by law, they weren't able to take it. Like God said, like this is pretty much their housing. You can't take this from someone. And yet Jesus was saying on the Sermon on the Mount, hey, when someone asks you for the light jacket, give them the heavy one too. And it was part of this mind-blowing, stuff that Jesus was saying in the Sermon on the Mount, to go that extra mile, to go above and beyond. 28, you shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. Paul the Apostle will have to take back his words in the book of Acts, chapter, what is it? Probably like 22, 23, right in there, where he is taken before the high priest and he curses at him. He's like, well, I'm sorry, I should not curse a ruler of the people. Verse 29, you shall not delay to offer the first of your ripe produce and your juices. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. Likewise you shall do with your oxen, your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days, and on the 8th day you shall give it to me. And you shall surely be holy men to me. You shall not eat meat torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. So again, we're turning into this big pot of soup of all these different ingredients, of all these different laws and rules. And some of them are going to get repeated and more clarified and go deeper. But, this last one, second to last actually, you shall not delay to offer the first of your ripe produce. What God says is don't delay in giving. Even Dave Ramsey in his class talks about giving right as soon as you get your paycheck. It's the first fruits. It's true. If you wait to give, there's a temptation, to give your leftovers. And I honestly want to encourage all Christians, not so much the number, but the mentality and the attitude towards giving. Am I giving God my leftovers? Oh, look, I haven't given to the church. Well, what do I have? Oh, I've got this in my wallet. Here you go. That's an attitude of, I'm going to give to God whatever it seems to be. I got this. It's convenient. I'll give God what's convenient to give. But in the Old Testament, the principle was, don't delay. Don't delay. Decide. In the New Testament, it says to lay it aside, something that's proportionate, and plan to give it periodically on a certain day. And so Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. Both have a good little few verses on New Testament giving. But it does say to be intentional, to decide, I'm going to give this proportion of my income, and I'm going to give it on this day, the Sunday right after my paycheck. I'm going to give it before I pay all my bills because it's important to me. You see, people often pay their electric bill and things like that first because they don't want their power turned off. I don't think God's going to turn the power off on you. But we pay the things first that are important because we want to make sure it gets done and not forgotten. So the question is giving important to you? That's the heart of the issue. So God says, don't delay in doing this. Don't delay in giving of the first fruit. Make sure you make a decision that giving is important. I'm going to decide what it's going to be, and I'm going to do as I intend to do and give it at the time I've decided to give at. You can give once a year. You can give every day. There's really no rules, but be intentional and decide, and then don't delay once you make that decision. So there you go. A bunch of stuff wrapping up chapter 22. In chapter 23, we're going to see, again, more bunches of stuff, laws about Sabbaths and feasts and other things. So, yeah, we'll just kind of keep going through the Mosaic Law tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. live on Facebook. So, God bless you guys. Have a great day. Ladies, don't forget the Christmas party for you is at my house tonight. I don't know where I'll be. I'll be somewhere, but not here. So God bless you guys. Have a great day.